Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 2300 Degrees here in the amphitheater. Can you all hear me? All right, great. So tonight we have a very special visiting artist. Her name is Nisha Bansil. Let's give her a warm welcome to the stage tonight. Now, Nisha is, you can tell maybe how she's dressed. She's not going to blow glass tonight. She's not going to be the glass blower. So this is going to be a little bit different than our usual demonstrations here for 2300 in the amphitheater. Nisha is sort of the ringleader, and she's got a lot of artists here helping her out tonight. So tonight, helping Nisha with the sound and music is Simon Bjarning. So Simon is a local musician. He's from Denmark originally, and he studied at the Royal Conservatory. And also, he plays with the orchestra of the Southern Finger Lakes, and he specializes in percussion. So he's going to be providing some of the music and sound that's an integral part of the show tonight. So that's Simon. We've also got some glass blowers here. We've got our crew from Corning, and that's Chris Rochelle right there. And he's been here at Corning for many, many years, worked at the Steuben Glass Factory. Yeah, let's give them all a warm welcome, if you wouldn't mind. Aaron Jack and Heather Spiewak. And then visiting us here, he lives in Corning, but he also works at a studio in Woodstock, New York, is Ernesto Echevarria. So that's the crew tonight. Tonight we also have some commentary from Dr. Jane Cook, who's our in-house chief scientist. My name's Jeff Mack. If you guys have any questions about what's going on tonight and what you're seeing, just let us know. And we're also live streaming, so we'll be getting questions from the internet as well. So without further ado, we're going to kick off this program. And Nisha is going to be working with Simon here to show us some sound. She's going to give us a visual representation of sound waves using a special plate. So let's watch. All right, so right now Simon is producing a tone. He's using a tone generator, and you can hear that sort of background tone going, and that's creating vibration in that plate, and it's going to create a pattern on that plate. And that pattern is something that inspires Nisha in her work. Now, a little bit more about Nisha. So Nisha is from East Meredith, New York, and she's a multimedia artist. She does work with glass, and that is her favorite thing to work with these days. And she specializes in fusing glass and kiln working with glass. But she's inspired by natural phenomena, so phenomena in the natural world, including sound. And she likes creating visual representations of sound waves and relating them to various things that she thinks about in her art.
This technology that she's using right now is called a Clondy plate. It was actually invented in the late 1700s by a German physicist, figured out the way to understand why specific patterns form on specific shapes of pieces of metal, depending upon the tone that goes through. She's actually vibrating glass, but she's not going to melt the glass. She's just using those glass particles, and it could be any small, sandy type of material or little balls of material, but the plate is bouncing up and down at a very specific speed. And as those sound waves bounce off the edges, they create places where the plate's going up, where the plate's going down, but where the plate isn't moving at all, that's where the particles sit. And for any given tone, for any shape of plate, you get these unique patterns, which, as Jeff was saying, inspire Nisha with ideas of mandala, of the sacred patterns from different cultures throughout history, throughout the culture. They all have these patterns that show up in religious art and philosophical discussions. But it was only 200 or so years ago that we learned that these patterns actually occur naturally by the vibrations, by sound vibration in materials.
And I was seeing that some of these patterns actually reflect molecular structures of various objects, like meteorites and
yes,
things like that.
Nature usually picks one idea and then uses it in lots of different ways, in different scales, and different materials, and different parts of the way things work. Waves are everywhere, whether it's the waves on an ocean, or waves of sound, or waves of electrons. It works really well, but it also makes beautiful patterns that humans love and love to reproduce.
That's great. So Nisha takes these patterns and she puts them into her work. She uses them in cast work. And
yes.
Here's a piece here, if you guys get a chance at some point in the evening.
She makes the pattern. She can make the patterns this way, but she doesn't actually directly turn these patterns then into the glass art. You can simulate these. The mathematics of how these patterns form are well known now, and so she can create simulations, and I think and then translate those simulations into physical objects. And we have a video available, I believe, of 3D printing based on a computer simulation that she did when she was here in Artist in Residence. Here we go. So you can see she's printing a calculated Clondi pattern in plastic using a 3D printer. And it was something like that made, this is the glass object that was made after the 3D printing was then used to make a plaster mold, and then the glass was melted into the mold to make the objects. And we're going to be playing around with a number of these objects. That's sped up, I think. But not only does it make these beautiful objects with the beautiful textures, but once you create these textures, of course, one of the amazing things about glass isn't just its formability, it's how beautiful it is, how optically clear or colored it can be. And so when we put light through these patterns, they're fantastic as well. They project these patterns onto things, and they make these gorgeous patterns. So they become these optically active, as we say, materials that have so much to say.
All right, so we've seen the sound on the plate. Nisha has another object here that she's going to be showing to us pretty soon. It looks like Chris Rochelle and the gaffers are starting on a project that Nisha wanted to do. She's going to be making a pyrographic drawing. So she's going to use molten glass to actually stamp on this piece of wet paper here on the floor, and she's going to make a pattern. So she's already actually laid it out in pencil. You probably can't see that from where you are, but Chris is going to take that and he's going to burn in impressions. So the tile that he picked up has a pattern from one of these sound waves from these tone generators, and he's creating another pattern. So you're going to have a pattern within a pattern, and it's almost like printmaking with fire, with molten glass. And of course, Nisha's history as an artist began in printmaking. So she studied at the State University of New York at New Paltz, and specialized in printmaking there. Now, how did she get to glass? Well, she took a class here at the Corning Museum of Glass on glass casting and fusing from Denise Stillwagon-Leon, who is another New York State-based artist who teaches here. And so for the past 20 years or so, Nisha has been pretty fascinated by glass, and it's been one of her favorite materials to express her ideas about natural phenomena. So if you want, sorry.
So the pattern that she's making is actually a specific, even though she's got these hexagonal pieces, these six-sided pieces with these Clondi patterns cast in, you'll notice instead of doing like 6 together like a honeycomb, she's actually used 5. An arrangement of 5. And this, Nisha is very much not just inspired by sort of the physical phenomenon, but the mathematics behind physical phenomenon. And this idea of using 5 instead of 6 creates a very special pattern called a Penrose tiling that was discovered in the last century by Roger Penrose, a British physicist and mathematician. It's also another one of these things that humans discovered that have a great deal of beauty, and they're very intriguing, but they're also very deeply profound ideas that contribute to this. Actually, the very structure of the universe is held in this idea of Penrose tiling, of 5-fold symmetry like a star instead of 6-fold like a hexagon. And so she's using that as part of the structure that she's asked the artist to print for her.
So this is also something you see in architecture, in ancient architecture and Islamic architecture.
Yes.
Is this type of patterning.
And Nisha reaches into lots of different areas of history, of cultures, where this mandala, this idea of the sacred geometry, is used in different religions, but it comes from the mathematics as well.
Very cool. So you notice also that paper that's on the floor has been soaked in water. Now, if they took that glass tile and they pressed it into the paper and the paper was dry, it would catch on fire. So it has to be kept wet the whole time. And the last time when they were practicing this, she was actually splashing even more water on there, but looks like it's coming together pretty well.
You know, Jeff, an interesting symmetry with that, if I go over and pick this up. One of the tools that the glass artists would use are glass blowers, and you'll see them using this later on in the night, is this. This is a newspaper pad. It's folded newspaper soaked in water that they can then use to touch the hot glass and to shape the hot glass with. So in this case, they're using wet paper to shape the glass, and now they're using hot glass to burn the wet paper to make the art. Yep. I like that balance.
So again, this is a little bit different program. It's not just glass blowing. There is going to be some glass blowing a little later on, and we do have a visiting gaffer, Ernesto Echeverria, and he is the studio manager for Pablo Glass, which is in Woodstock, New York. But he also works here quite a bit at the studio, gaffing for artists. That means he fabricates glass. So he's an expert glass blower, and he's here with our team tonight. And they're going to be working on a couple different things. So Nisha works with sound waves, and one of her series of work is called Sound Mandala, and that's what this portion of the program is going to be about. But she also works with, she's fascinated by origami and the geometry of that. And she has a series of work called Glass Origami. And she actually casts glass things that look like they're made out of paper because they're actually formed out of paper first. A mold is made around it, and then glass replaces where the paper was. And she can make these very delicate pâte de verre fusings. So this is actually not paper. This is glass. And this is the type of work that Nisha makes. So she's what we would call a conceptual artist. She's not focused on the craft of glass. She uses it as a medium to express her ideas. So it's just one of many materials she uses, but one she's been fascinated with for quite a while.
Part of that switching between or not being held to a specific way of making this, it's still one medium, but it's just hybrid between whether it's glass blowing or glass casting or glass folding, pâte de verre, is actually very much the way that industrial engineers, materials engineers approach the material, where if you have something to say, you use the right combination of processes to make the object in the same way that a conceptual artist, instead of focusing in on technique to make an object a particular way, they focus on the end product and then do the things that are necessary to make it.
Yeah. So it's a lot different than the artists we typically get here. Typically, you'll come to a 2300 and you'll see a glass blower. And Nisha has blown glass, but her specialty in glass is more casting, which it takes days and weeks and months. So it's not something that's great for a demonstration. So Nisha's kind of come up with this 3-ring circus. So you can see a lot of things. So you have some visual spectacle. We had the plate before. In just a little bit, she's going to use what's called a Rubens tube.
Rubens tube.
Which is going to be a surprise. It might wake you up here in just a second. But the Rubens tube is this big aluminum tube that you see here in front of the stage. And I'm not sure, Nisha, what do you think? Are we going to move on to that? Okay. Do you guys want to see the Rubens tube? It's sort of a pyrotechnic thing, so there's fire. Yeah.
So let's light this candle, as
Here
they say
it
at
goes.
NASA.
So she's going to turn on the gas. So that tube fills with gas. Bada boom. There we go. 2,300 degrees, ladies and gentlemen. And now there's if you notice, there's a speaker. There's a speaker on one end, and that speaker changes the air pressure in that tube. And so Simon is going to be playing some music through there, and you're going to see that changing the flame pattern here. So the Rubens tube was invented by another German physicist, Heinrich Rubens, and I think he developed this curiosity in 1905 to demonstrate air pressure and sound waves and how they change air pressure.
Right,
so
so instead of with the sound waves vibrating the plate and making a pattern as it bounces off all the different edges of the plate and then bounces back towards the center, now the sound waves are bouncing back and forth towards the end of the tube. And just like a flute or a clarinet has specific frequencies that make the notes that correspond to places where sound waves make 1 or 2 or 3 high points and low points, the Rubens tube will do the same sort of thing. But now instead of music coming out of the tube with the pattern that you hear, fire will come out of the tube with the pattern that you see.
yeah. So one cool thing about a glass studio that we all know about is the fire, and that might be something.
That's why I'm here.
That might be something that Nisha is drawn to. Maybe one of the reasons she likes glass, because this is her toy, this is her thing, and she built that. And she had a friend who's an expert aluminum welder help her weld that together. But this is her thing, and she brought it here just for her performance. But you might see this in the future at other 2,300 degrees.
Oh, we get to
events.
keep this?
Well, we might borrow it from Nisha.
Cool.
Yeah, so keep your eyes peeled.
That's heck of a pipe warmer.
Oh, it really is, yeah. The barbecue. How's the Rubens? Oh, there we go. That's Simon Bjarning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for Simon. He's doing a great job. So make sure to check out his website too, simonbjarning.com. You'll find out more about his career as a musician and a percussionist. All right. Yeah, let's hear it for Simon.
We definitely need to have that in house.
Oh yeah.
I can find lots of uses for something like that.
So this is Chris Rochelle here at the main gaffer's bench, and he's going to be starting on a project for Nisha. He's going to be making a bowl similar to this one here, and this is a bowl that they made a few weeks ago. And what they're doing is they're picking up one of the tiles that Nisha has made with the sound wave pattern on it and incorporating it, fusing it to the bottom of a blown piece of glass, and then Chris makes it into this beautiful low bowl, this low platter. So let's check that out. If anybody has any questions for either myself or Jane Cook, just let us know. Just raise your hand. We'll be out there milling about.
We've got a question. You got to roam up there?
Yeah. Now, before we get too far along, also, Nisha has a project that includes some audience participation. Does that sound like fun? Does anybody think that sounds like fun? You think that sounds like fun? Has anybody tried origami before? Show of hands. No? Yes?
There's a few.
Is there anybody here who would like to try some origami with the instruction from Nisha Bansil? Is there anybody? Let's see, a show of hands, applause, anybody? We've got paper for probably everybody here, or maybe some of you who'd like to try, but that's going to be something that we do next, probably while Chris is making this bowl. What's your question, sir? Question for Nisha. What age did you start at? All right, so Nisha.
I started working with glass when I was 19, so it's been a long time.
And he wants to know what inspired you to work with glass. So.
Oh, okay. So I went to school for printmaking, and I got really excited by my plates, but I wasn't really excited by the prints that I was generating. So in my last year of college, I tried to figure out a way to print in a way that I could show my plates, and glass was how I started doing it. So that's what introduced me to glass.
Great question. And Nisha, have you always been an artist, essentially, since you were little, since you were a child? Yeah.
Probably, she said.
All right, so I'm going to grab a stack of paper here, and we'll just go ahead and hand them out to those who want to try this project with Nisha. I'm going to give half of this pile to Jane.
What's going on? Oh, thank you.
So I'll hit this side.
I'll hit this side.
All right, who wants to try some origami?
Who wants to be
Anybody?
flyered?
We got some paper here for you. Why not give it a go? Anybody? Yeah, all right. How about you, sir?
Square
No.
paper.
All right. One
Who
for
wants
family.
square paper? What a great
Anybody
thing to take
else?
home.
All right, here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. So it's not the super lightweight origami paper if you're like all origami, but origami, for people, is the Japanese art of paper folding. So if you see like the cranes and they're very popular, people folding cranes or other animal types of shapes. The type of origami that Nisha is going to demonstrate is something that's much more, it's sort of flat. It's flat patterns and getting things to sort of just stand up and have shape. I've got one left. Do you have more? Do you have more?
I have more, yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
And the patterns, the flat, taking the flat and making it stand up away from it, what was flat, is in these patterns that are representative of the type of, the bouncing of the flame or the bouncing of the glass powders. It's all about taking one thing and moving it in a whole nother direction.
Wouldn't it? Well, the one thing is the speaker might get hot in a fireplace, so that would have to be on the outside.
Okay,
She made
so
this like a custom thing, but isn't
we're
it
gonna fold a hexagon.
your music?
So the first thing that you're gonna do is you're going to fold your paper in half, but only pinch the outside ends.
We might want to zoom in on what's going on there. Maybe the handheld camera.
So,
All right, everybody watch. This is very complicated.
okay.
Okay.
So the next step is to fold the outside edge towards the middle, but you're just creasing the middle of that seam. So I'm just pushing down in the middle of it.
Nisha, you got to slow it down. There's people who don't have paper yet.
Oh no, I'm sorry, did I start too early?
Yeah, just 1 sec.
Okay.
All right, is there anybody else who needs paper? There you go. Anybody else? All right, everybody's got their paper. All right, Nisha.
Okay, so I'm gonna start again. Fold in the middle, pinch on the corners. Okay? And then fold towards the middle, but pinch in the center. And then, okay. So the next side is the same way. You're gonna fold the opposite edge in towards the middle and pinch in the center. So when you're done, when you're done, you're going to be able to see that you have 2 pinches towards the outer edges, and they're kind of in the middle of your paper. So you're going to put a finger on the center crease and fold to the opposite pinch. So you're making I guess that would be Jane, help me, is this a 30 or a 60 degree angle? Should I just leave it here? Is that better? I saw that already. Okay. All right. So is everybody kind of with me? Like, raise your hand if you're 5 steps behind.
Yeah, I have to watch out.
Everybody's 5 steps behind. Okay. So, in the way that we made this one, we're going to go around in all 4 corners. So the next one is going to pinch over so that you're meeting the line with the opposite edge. So then you're going to have, when you open your paper, you're just going to have a V shape pointing down. Yep. Okay. So the next step is to flip it over and do the exact same thing. So now, in theory, what you'd have is a diamond shape in the middle and then 2 long triangles on either side. Possible? Yeah. Okay.
If you don't get it, it's okay. You won't be tested.
All right, so the
also
next step is
being
to
recorded,
fold
so
your
you can
paper
come back and do this later.
entirely in half. So then you would have 3 triangles on the front of your paper. Okay, so the next step is to fold it in half again in the same direction. Okay, so it's 2 folds in half, and now you'll see that you have more than 3 triangles, so you're going to crease along all of those, front and back, so you can see your lines, and you're just going to keep creasing on those lines
as you work along the paper. And you have to flip it over onto the opposite side so that you get all of them. All right, and then after you do that, you're gonna repeat that step. So you're gonna fold it in half again. And now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got 14 triangles on the surface of my fold. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing, just crease them forwards and backwards so that it makes a grid on the paper.
I'm seeing some brave souls out there who are still plugging along, are definitely right up with her. This is great.
All right.
I couldn't do it. I tried.
Okay, so at this point, after you've creased both your fronts and your backs, you're gonna have a grid of paper that's broken up into triangles. And you can keep going infinitely like this. You can just keep folding it and making triangles. And the more triangles you make, the smaller or bigger your hexagons will end up being. So that was the easy part. So. All right, when you guys get there, just raise your hands so I don't go on before like most people have gotten to this place. Okay, so I don't know if that's on. Okay, so in the center of your paper, you're gonna see a hexagon, and I'm gonna just make mine so you guys can see it. And I'm just pinching the paper downwards to get that first crease of the hexagon. And you can put this anywhere on the paper. It doesn't have to be in the center, but you're gonna look for 6 triangles and you're gonna go all the way around them and pinch a hexagon. Then, so.
Wow, you guys are still going. That's good.
So the next thing that we have to do is make 60-degree pleats, and that's going to make the final hexagon. So in order to do that, you're going to look at the points of all of your hexagons, and you're going to pinch diagonally away from them. So you get this shape. So, whoops, I missed one. All right, so what you see then is you see the hexagon in the center, and then you have diagonal lines coming out from all of the points that it's like almost a star. So what you need to do now is twist it. And the easiest way to do it is to start in one direction and start pushing everything in that direction. So it's a little weird, but just keep pushing, and then as you flatten it out, you'll see that it wants to fold over, and so you just keep going, and it keeps folding. Then
Folding, folding.
folding, folding. All right, so when you're done, in theory, you have a hexagon on the front and a hexagon on the back.
All right, who got it?
Who got it?
No.
Anybody?
Anybody?
Did anybody get it?
Oh, nice.
I got a few hands
Up
up.
in the corner?
Now imagine taking that, coating it with fine glass powder, and firing it, getting the powder to stick together so you make something like this that's made out of a bunch of those, but it's actually made out of glass. And then try to pick that up with more glass.
Right, and they all go together. And so if you want to continue with this, you can just keep making hexagons indefinitely by making 60-degree pleat intersections, and then they just keep on happening.
And you could just wrap that around. You could make a sphere out of this eventually, couldn't you? If you had a big enough piece of paper, or
Yep.
you could just make a big.
Yep, I just make really large pieces. The piece that we're going to be picking up has about 40 hexagons on it, or it started out that way, so you just keep going and going and going in circles.
All right.
If you want to see
Origami.
some more like really amazing origami like this, where you're taking something flat and square and turning it into something round, look at the work of a professor at MIT, Professor Eric Demain at MIT, has described the mathematics of this and also how to make origami where the folds are actually curved. Instead of always making straight folds, how do you make curved folds to make curved things? It's very inspiring to Nisha. And Eric's father, Marty, is actually the artist in residence at MIT, and he's a glass blower as well. So glass and paper folding, it goes together much more than just Nisha. It's a very inspiring and versatile combination. So Chris has made a bubble and has picked up one of Nisha's castings on the face of the bubble, and now they're going to heat that up and begin to form this into the bowl shape.
Oh, so they fused it on there.
They did the pickup.
So just a brief update. So in addition to Simon Bjarning, there are other musicians here tonight. We've got live music out in the auditorium. And so we've got the Weber brothers out there. Have you guys seen them yet? Some of you? And let's see, we've got some classic rock up in the over in the cafe, The Variables. And you know, if there's 23% off your purchase in the museum shop, so that's something to keep in mind too. So now's a good time to do a little Christmas shopping if you haven't done so already. There's food, there's drinks, hors d'oeuvres and soft drinks are free, and there's more if you'd like. And members, don't forget to take advantage of your membership perks. Enjoy express tickets for the food and beverage, and you'll be able to access the private members only bar, so just keep that in mind. And also there is a free shuttle to the parking lot, so you don't need to walk all the way out there if you don't have to. So yeah, thanks for coming, thanks for being here. And again, this is Nisha Bansil. Yep. East Meredith, New York. So she's a local. She's a multimedia artist, and she's working with our gaffers here. Right now, this is Chris Rochelle making a piece of glass for her. It's going to be a deep bowl, or a shallow bowl, with a pattern in it that Nisha has generated using sound waves. Do you have a question, sir? Are the sound waves starting now? Well, if you missed the first part of the demonstration, Nisha had a little bit of a display going. She had an aluminum plate that she generated patterns on using sound. So, Simon Bjarning, do it again?
Set it up again? Sure.
Should we do it again? Okay. What do you say, Nisha? All right, we're going to do it again. So there's lots of stuff going on tonight. We're making glass. We're making a spectacle. And Nisha Bansil is the ringleader here.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Three-ring circus.
Three-ring circus. She's a conceptual artist, also a multimedia artist. She does fabricate. She does work with her hands. She does make things. But when she makes her own art, one thing you'll notice about Nisha is that she loves collaborating. She loves working with others. So we've got a big team here. We've got Simon Bjarning. Sorry. And yeah, And he is a percussionist. He is here with us tonight, and he's making some sound waves for Nisha. So Simon, you can also see him playing with the orchestra, the Southern Finger Lakes. Yeah, quite often. And that must have been Marshall. Yep, that's Marshall.
Marshall's here.
Marshall Hyde. So a little plug for them. We're doing a little collaboration tonight. Ernesto Echevarria from Corning, also from Woodstock, New York, where he manages Pablo Glass. It's a glass studio up there. And he is a visiting gaffer, and he's going to be working for Nisha on the next piece, where they're going to encapsulate one of Nisha's glass origami figures.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it looks like, so Simon has a tone generator app on his phone, and he's creating tones at different frequencies, and that's going to vibrate this metal plate. So maybe we could get a shot of the metal plate, because people were interested in seeing how we get the sound wave patterns and how Nisha develops that visual representation of sound waves. Maybe.
So we're trying to call an audible with our AV folks here if we can get a down camera on this.
Well, you can see there, there's a nice overhead view. So the frequency that Simon has running right now is making sort of a bullseye pattern. The higher the frequency goes, the more complicated the patterning gets as all the little pieces of glass and salt start to vibrate. So you can see there's chaos, and out of that chaos comes order. And that's just the type of phenomenon that Nisha is very interested in representing in glass. And she finds that one of the best mediums for her to express these ideas.
Yeah, again, this particular phenomenon is called a Clondi pattern, or a Clondi plate. It starts with CHL, Clondi, after a German physicist, late 18th, early 19th century physicist who described this. And he says there's all these different patterns that form that are just an interaction with the sound waves and the shape of the plate. If you had a round plate or a hexagonal plate or a rectangular plate, you'd actually get a different pattern for the same frequency. So it's very complicated mathematics and physics that go into it, but it's these beautiful, simple patterns that can form.
Almost looks like a chain link fence.
Yeah, these are actually used by musical instrument makers to look at the shape of the, like cellos and violins. They'll vibrate, they'll bow the instrument and look at the shape of the Clondi patterns.
Oh, okay.
And that can tell them how pure, how well designed the musical instrument actually is.
No kidding. All right, so looks like they're starting to blow the form out. You can see that the tile that they applied to the bottom of the bubble is starting to spread out. So everything's going to start expanding at the same rate as they blow this up. And Chris is going to be holding that in. He wants to hold that bottom in just a little because he doesn't want the tile that they picked up to distort too much. And is there air trapped between the bubble and, is there air trapped? Yeah, okay. Okay, so kind of like if you were at our last 2300 degrees party, we had an artist from Sweden here, and he was doing a technique called Ariel, where he's trapping air. So this is kind of a similar technique. It's done a little bit differently, but the tile had a relief in it. So when they attached the tile to the bottom of the soft bubble, air got trapped in all of the little valleys of the relief pattern.
We showed the video earlier of Nisha working at the studio with a 3D printer, and this being an example of taking those sound patterns and then turning them into a physical object that she then molded and then cast into. This is one of those pieces that she cast the glass into to replicate these mathematically perfect functions, shapes that come from interfering sound waves.
Yeah, these are beautiful pieces too. So not only are they sort of artistic explorations, but they turn into these beautiful objects. So make sure to check those out before you leave the amphitheater, before you take off tonight. So earlier on in the program, I was talking about Nisha's history with glass. You know, she started as a printmaker. She was saying that she became fascinated by the plates, and she almost became more interested in the plates than the actual prints she was making on paper. And then several years ago, maybe 20 years ago or a little less, she came here to Corning and took a class with Denise Stillwagon-Leone, who is right here in the front row. So she inspired Nisha with her class here at Corning to start working with glass. So it's great that she can be here tonight. It's a wonderful thing. It's the only reason Nisha is actually here, because she works with glass. Now, she's not a glass blower. For those of you just joining us, we are working with Nisha Bansil. She is a multimedia artist, and today she is working with glass. She loves glass. She started working with glass 20 years ago, and here she is at the Corning Museum working with her friends and some of the gaffers here to make some of her own ideas in glass. So that's Ernesto Echeverria at the bench now, working with Chris Rochelle and Heather Spiewak. They're starting to inflate this bubble. They're getting it to its maximum volume before they flatten it out, because this is going to be a low dish. They're going to change the shape of that, and they're going to use heat and gravity. And they use the furnace to reheat. All right, so right now they have more or less a round bubble. I have a feeling the next step is going to be to flatten that out and make it more of a flat disc. And this is a good example of what they're making here. It's going to be similar to this dish right here. There we go. Yeah.
It's just the dish. There's not a foot on the bottom, though. It's
no
just
foot.
Gonna be
Yeah.
just a low form.
Yeah.
Like that. Now this one, if you look at this one, it has the bubbles where the indents were trapped between the glass. This is a trick that's often used by glassmakers to leave lines of air within the glass itself, right, for like twisted stems.
That's
and
right.
Bubble trap. See a lot of
Air
holiday
trap.
ornaments and air trap.
Air trap.
Now this one, if you look at it, the pattern is sort of, there's a relic of the pattern there, but it's a little bit lost. In the process of making this experimental bowl, it got a little bit hotter, and when glass gets hot, it gets soft, and
Yeah.
the bubble, the trapped air doesn't necessarily want to stay trapped, so it starts
Yeah.
to move around a little bit.
That's
In
right.
this one, they're going to try and control the process more so that they end up with a crisper pattern in bubbles left behind. The other thing that they did different with these castings is they included some color as well. So it's just the clear glass leaving the bubble traps. There'll also be a relic of the color pattern that'll be in the glass as well.
Right. Yeah, and she uses glass powders. That's what they're trying to make. That's
Yes.
right. Yep.
It's with the pattern that's based on the sort of Clondy patterns that we were showing with the powders before. But she generated the patterns with mathematically, printed them in a 3D printer, and then used the 3D printing to print into the glass. So it's sort of math to 3D printing to plaster to glass to what we're seeing now. So it's multi-step process in order to take one thing and turn it into a different world.
That's right. There's a lot of build-up to this moment here at the furnace. This is just one step in the process, and it's usually the step where things can go terribly wrong.
Yeah,
And-
I mean, essentially this piece has been in process for weeks.
Yeah.
And it could all fail, dock on glass.
Right.
That it could all fail at the last moment when they do the final Punty transfer.
That's right. That's right. So this is a special moment, and we're glad you all get to see it. And these pieces, this isn't like a production line. So Nisha is an artist. These are things she's experimenting with. This is a series of work that she calls sound mandalas. So she has different objects that she creates using this concept of capturing sound waves visually and then representing them in glass. So definitely check out her website if you have any interest in what we're talking about and what she does. Check out her website, NishaBansil.com, and you can see how all the different series she's been working on over the past several years.
She's worked with different types of artists too. She's worked with I believe, a Buddhist monk, and with flute sound from that, and just different patterns, different religions, different cultures, all sort of coalescing around this mathematically, naturally occurring phenomenon that humans came across without even really knowing about what was going on behind it.
That's right.
So they're attaching the Punty now. Let's see. They can get it off the blowpipe.
So that's Aaron Jack there. He's got the Punty. The Punty is a solid steel rod. Chris is attaching it right in the center of the bottom. And this is going to allow them to break it free from the blowpipe. It's going to be on this handle for the rest of its creation, for the rest of its making. There'll be a small hole at the top of the bubble. That's the hole they were blowing into to inflate the glass bubble, and that's going to be spread out to eventually become the rim of the bowl.
A particularly delicate moment. We often say you have to break glass to make glass.
Break glass to make it.
But just like you try to make it where you want it made, you got to break it where you want it to break. So Chris has got things set up. He's just going to try and crack it right at that line.
There we go. Nice
And
Punty transfer.
Excellent.
All right, so back into the furnace that goes. They're going to take a little while to build up the heat on that lip before they can start to stretch that out again. And I think that at the same time, they're going to be starting on another piece of glass that's going to be blown. So remember, Nisha works with sound waves. She has her Sound Mandala series. She also has a series called Glass Origami. That's why we were playing with all the paper earlier. Can I see a show of hands? Who got the object she was trying to get you to make? I couldn't do it. There's too many folds for me, but...
Who maybe didn't get it but feel proud of their effort?
Yeah, who was proud?
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
I was proud of my effort,
That's what
too.
we want to
Yeah.
see.
And you guys you can keep those papers if you want. You can take those home with you.
And this live feed's going to be available on YouTube, ultimately, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so you can go back and watch her demo again and just try it as many times as you like.
Yeah,
We're not going to teach you how to do the glass powder, the pâte à verre, though.
it's all secret.
That's
all secret. So the techniques she uses to make what look like folded paper origami out of glass is pretty proprietary. It's something that she developed on her own, but she actually folds heavy paper called elephant paper into the forms, and then that goes into a mold, and she's able to pull that all out and keep the mold intact without damaging it before she loads that with glass and then fuses it all together at high temperatures in an oven. So that's going to be the next piece that's made, and Ernesto is going to be gaffing that piece. She has the piece of glass origami already in a kiln over here. It's at 950 degrees Fahrenheit. It's up to temperature for pickup, and Ernesto is going to encapsulate that in a glass dome. So that's going to be the final piece of the evening. So that's going to be the piece that's made after this platter. So there's still lots to see.
I think another interesting thing about the way that Nisha works is it's very experimental. As you were saying, I mean, she's invented her version of this moldless pâte à verre, of this glass paste type of process. She's pioneered this, she's one of the pioneers really in the field of using 3D printing to make glass artwork, which is
right.
Relatively new, and finding the right combination of steps. But there's also some interesting things that and we'll see some more of this with the pâte à verre also, is different types of glass behave differently. And not all manufacturers make glass that is what we say compatible with other types. They expand or contract differently, or they react with each other chemically. And Nisha's been sort of feeling her way forward as she makes this glass do things that it wasn't designed to do. You don't always immediately succeed. And glass art is a great deal of failure. It's a great deal of experimentation, and it's really been a wonderful thing about contemporary glass art. And you'll see this throughout our contemporary art and design wing and in the modern glass galleries. The last 50 years or so have been full of experimentation by artists working with glass in new ways or new types of glass in old ways. And it's really a growing, lively field. And the museum, the Corning Museum of Glass, is proud to be a representative of that and a supporter of that type of research.
That's right, Jane. Another thing we do know about experimenting with glass is that it can be expensive. So Nisha has been fortunate enough. She's been awarded residencies, several residencies. One that she did last year right here at the Corning Museum of Glass, and she got to experiment with some of these concepts right over in the studio across the street, our educational facility here at the museum. She's also done residencies with Bullseye glass, and she's represented by Bullseye out on the West Coast in Portland and in San Francisco at galleries. So she works with Bullseye glass, which is similar but a little bit different than the glass we use here today. So she's had to adapt her process. But having these residencies and having the support of places like the Corning Museum and Bullseye Glass Company have really helped her to advance her concepts in glass, because it can be very expensive doing it on your own. All right, so they're getting it looks like it's partially opened. Chris trimmed that lip down a little bit, so any bit of the jagged edge or unevenness from where it broke free from the blowpipe is all gone now. So the next steps are building up the heat in the back and then spreading this out into this beautiful platter. Now this is one of the most difficult shapes to produce in glass, this low bowl disc shape. But Chris is very good at it, so we get to see an expert here.
You can see in our special reheating hole cam here, this view from the back side, allowing you to see how that pattern is sticking around. It's not only you don't see the color in that heat image, but it looks like they've done a good job with the bubble trap and the color.
Really good control there. And now Aaron Jack is rolling some glass on the Marver. That's some blue glass. Looks like it matches the tile that's on the base of the dish here. And Chris is going to wind that around the lip to make a nice accent called a lip wrap. So you get to see how stringy molten glass is when it's this hot, 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
This is a great place to be on a cold solstice eve.
That's right. That's right. What a better place to be than a hot shop on a cold night. So this is a good time to take questions if anybody has any questions about glass or about our visiting artist, Nisha Bansil. Anybody? No questions. Well, we're doing a good job then explaining things.
I'll take it as that. Well done.
Well, if you do have any questions, just wave your hand or holler and get our attention. This is Jane, I'm Jeff, and we're here to help you and answer questions for you if you need. All right, so they got the lip wrap on there. They're going to continue to expand that open, and again, this is the shape they're going for. If you're joining us just now, we're working with a very special guest artist by the name of Nisha Bansil. And she's working with our crew here. She's got a visiting musician and a visiting gaffer. So the musician's name is Simon Bjarning. And he works as a percussionist for the orchestra of the Southern Finger Lakes. And she's also brought a guest gaffer from Corning who works at the studio quite a bit. He fabricates a lot of glass for visiting artists. Ernesto Echeverria. So thanks to Simon and Ernesto for being here, helping Nisha out tonight. Has anybody seen the variables? Has anybody seen the band yet? No? What's the other band? Oh, okay. The other band is in the cafe. No, that's the variables. So in the auditorium, we've got the Weber brothers. Has anybody seen the Weber brothers? I think at my grill at home.
All right.
No? All right. Okay, good. One, yeah. Well, make sure to check that out at some point this evening. There's plenty of food and drink. There's a free shuttle back to the parking lot if you don't want to walk, if it's too cold for you. Just saying. And if the night's too long for you, feel free to stay at the Staybridge Suites just across the parking lot. Yeah. All right. I had a good question. Why is a low bowl so hard to make? Why is a low bowl so hard to make? Well, it's hard to make for me anyways, but I know a lot of glass blowers. I'm a glass blower, and I know that it's something we practice a lot because it is challenging. And I think it has to do with the surface area. So essentially you're taking a sphere, you're peeling it open, and the lower you make it, the harder it is to control because you have to turn it very quickly, but also you don't want to turn it so quick that the centrifugal force takes over and makes it a flat disc. You want to retain that edge, so you have to hold it in long enough to freeze it in place.
It seems like, I've watched a lot of these demos, and there's so many shapes in between where he started and where he's going and you actually hit that bottom shape pretty early on.
That's right.
But it's so close to where you're trying to heat to change the top that you're in with not a lot of room, where you've got to have a lot of temperature difference to,
you got it.
to keep it working. That's
you got it. You have to be very, very precise. And every move makes a difference. And every mistake you make with your hand will be amplified because of the increased surface area. That's the best I can do with answering that question.
You've got that patience. I mean, just the patience that he's showing.
That's right.
So many. I mean, if you counted the number of times he's had to do a reheat, anyone been counting? Is that anybody's thing?
Yeah.
It's a lot. He's gone in and out of there a lot.
Yeah, at least a dozen reheats.
And every time that he does, there's a chance that he's going to overheat it. That it's going to get wobbly. It's going to get wobbly a little bit further back in.
Yeah.
And lose that nice sphere that he made a half hour ago.
That's
the
right.
Backside sphere.
Everything makes a difference. The angle at which he's holding that iron,
the speed that he's turning it.
Yep, the rate.
And
his arms burning.
Aaron with the paddle, if could do something.
Yeah.
It's very much a team that's effort. Everybody's responsible.
So the wider that gets, the hotter it feels on your arm. So that's why Aaron holds that wooden board there. It's a heat shield to protect Chris's arm from the radiant heat. What do you guys think of that? I think Chris is doing a pretty good job. Maybe he deserves a round of applause for the beautiful work he's doing here for Nisha Bansil at 2300. So that's a special view, and some of you know that we have that view because we have a window made of fused silica glass in the back of that furnace. We were talking about a couple different types of glass. There's Bullseye glass that Nisha works with. It's very much like window glass. There's the soft glass that we work with here called soda lime. that glass inside of that furnace, so you can see what's happening in there, has to get up to 4,000 degrees to melt because it's made completely of silica. Maybe Dr. Cook could tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Usually with the glass, you add things to it to make it melt at a lower temperature, just like you add
The flux.
just like you put salt on your sidewalk to make the ice melt. You add things like salt to the silica sand to make it melt at a lower temperature. So if you try to make a glass that doesn't have any of those things in it, it's going to melt at the temperature that it was intended to, which is 4,000, 4,500 degrees. And so the good news is then you end up with something that's great for the backside of your reheating chamber or for the windows on space shuttles or things like that.
Spacecraft window.
Spacecraft windows, but not so good for glass blowing or for almost any type of artwork making. There's only a few artists in the world who actually use heat to transform fused silica into artwork.
Yeah.
But it's a very useful material.
Yeah.
Without having to give it to an artist.
Right. Our furnace melts all kinds of glass, but not that window.
We don't quite make it to 4,000.
Nope. So all our furnaces are around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why you get that sort of dull orange glow. 2,000 degrees. Everything's going to glow at that temperature. There we go. So you can see the glass beginning to distort with the heat. It starts to collapse in on itself, and then Chris counters that by turning the iron faster and then holding in that rim, and he gets this beautiful, beautiful low bowl shape called a Tossa.
The smoothness of his motions right now is everything.
Yeah.
His muscle memory and just fluid turning.
And it looks like Chris is pretty close to being finished with this piece. He's using that torch to heat the backside. That's not getting a lot of heat from the furnace. You can see it almost plugs up the hole when he goes in there. So he uses that torch to introduce a little heat in the backside, and that keeps it from cracking. If that glass drops too far below 900 degrees Fahrenheit, it will crack. So he's walking a fine line right now. He's balancing that temperature out, and then the final step is going to be to break it off of that iron without breaking the piece.
Oh, there's a beautiful shot of the pattern now.
Yeah, that's great. And the final step for anything we make at the furnace is to cool it slowly. So this piece will be loaded into an oven, and it'll anneal. It'll hold at 900 degrees for several hours, and then it'll slowly cool down over another 20 hours or so before it's room temperature.
So Aaron is putting on the silver suit. He'll be carrying the hot piece of glass. Remember, this piece of glass is going to still be 1,000 degrees or so when he puts on those Kevlar gloves and then dives into a hot box.
That's right.
Also at 900 degrees.
Yep. Yeah, so since Aaron's going to be sticking his head and his upper torso into an oven that's 900 degrees, he's going to cover it up and protect himself. Hey, there we have the finished bowl. That's Nisha Bansil, helped by Chris Rochelle here. Let's give him a round of applause. So that entire bowl is connected on a surface that's about the size of a nickel. So Chris has been very careful this whole time not to hit it too hard on the bench or knock it into something, because it doesn't take much effort to knock it off that pipe. He's just going to file that line, the constriction he made earlier on, and then a sharp tap to that iron will break it free. There we go. There's the finished piece, ladies and gentlemen.
Into the box. Another hand for Nisha Bansil, Chris Rochelle, and Ernesto Echeverria, Aaron Jack, Heather Spiewak.
All right, who's got questions now? Anybody? No
Anybody want to buy that?
What's my favorite color? Oh boy, I love the orange of the glass when it comes right out of the furnace. I'm biased
Everybody
'cause
loves
I'm a
cobalt blue.
Yeah, cobalt blue.
Cobalt
great
blue
too.
glass, right? Let's hear it. Woo!
All right. Well, thanks for being here. And we do have another piece in the chamber.
Well, while we're waiting, we're going to see the Rubens Tube light up here again.
There we go. Back to the Rubens Tube. Make sure to check that band out. We've got 2 bands here tonight. Lots of music going on. There's the Rubens Tube. So Simon Bjarning is playing some music. There is a speaker on the end of that tube that's affecting the air pressure and causing the gas to push in and out of that tube and giving us a nice display.
So just like we used fire to shape glass shaped by sound, now we're using sound to shape the fire.
Yes, that's
That's
right.
it?
That's right.
All these connections.
So we had a really good question here. We had a question. So let's say that piece is in a gallery. Now, whose name goes on that? Is it Nisha? Is it Chris? Whose piece is that? Well, in this case, Nisha is the artist. Chris is the craftsman or the fabricator. So Chris is paid as a craftsman. Nisha is the conceptual artist. So it's her work technically fabricated by Chris. Now there are some artists who have the craftsmen or craftspeople sign with them. Yoichi Ohira is a famous glass artist who lives in Murano, who is well known, but he also credits his craftsmen on the piece. He has everyone sign them. So that's a great question. But glass has traditionally always had that sort of separation between idea and fabricator. So it's very common historically in glass, and it's only been since the early 1960s, especially in this country, that artists and craftsmen have been sort of synonymous. You have a question up here? All right, so another question we had was, how long has Chris Rochelle been blowing glass? And I believe the answer to that is 18 years. And I'll have to ask Chris this question.
You can ask
Chris,
his,
I've got a question from the audience for you.
Actually, you can ask his mom. She's right there.
Question, Chris. So there was a question, what is your very favorite thing to make? Or what has been your very favorite thing that you've made? Okay. So to answer that question, he said goblets. So some of Chris's goblets you can see sitting on this oven over here. So very fancy goblets. Also that form he just made, the low bowl, that's one of his favorite things to make as well. Great question. Thank you for asking.
So shaping with fire and sound, would you call her an artist in resonance instead of an artist in residence?
That's pretty. That's funny.
Artist in resonance.
Artist in resonance. You guys get that?
Anybody nerdy enough to?
I'm nerdy enough to get
You're
it.
nerdy enough to get it.
I'm not even that nerdy. I don't know. I like it. It's Simon Bjarning on the keyboard over there. Intensely running the Rubens Tube.
I'd like to see a Rubens tube made out of glass. That would be at a few Silica or Boro. It's not too big for an industrial glass, a lathe turner to make something that big. Not a problem at all. There's actually a few places around the country where there are glass musical instrument bands where all the instruments are made out of glass by the glass artists. They have glass drums and glass flutes and all sorts of other clever sound making, musical sound making things made entirely out of glass. There was one at MIT. But you don't usually play the instrument with fire.
Hey everybody, if you're just joining us right now, we're working here with visiting artist Nisha Bansil. She has got a visiting gaffer working with her, Ernesto Echeverria. Ernesto is making a dome right now, a dome lid that is going to go over a piece that Nisha has made in a kiln that is a folded origami piece made out of glass.
This is actually a version of it from a test version from a while ago. I had to hold it very carefully because it's actually cracked right along there. But trying to take these very delicate, almost like sugar candy type forms that are made out of the glass and get them encased in very, very hot glass is a bit of a challenge. But this is the shape that Ernesto is making right now.
Yeah, so check that out. That's a piece they made here last week then when they were testing some of the techniques out. Nisha brought this toy along with her here. This is called a Rubens Tube. Yeah, and Simon Bjarning here is experimenting with the Rubens Tube. He's improvising some music here for us tonight, and you can see how the sound waves are changing the flame profile. It's pretty cool. It's a cool little toy. So the glass origami that Nisha has made is sitting in an oven right now. On the other side of the shop, you can see there's those two cube-shaped ovens on wheels. Those are called pickup ovens. And your piece is sitting at what, 1,000 degrees or so? So around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's preheated. And Ernesto is going to form a cylinder or a cover, like a cake plate, like a lid. It's on the plate right now. Or is this the plate? Okay. So they're making the cover. The origami is already fused to a plate that's in the oven. And then this is going to be like the dome lid or the cloche or whatever you call it, the top of
bell jar.
Yeah, like a cloche. So this goes over the top and protects the very delicate glass that's inside. So Ernesto was very particular about that pad. That pad is made out of newspaper. And he brought his special newspaper here to fold that up so he could shape the glass here at Corning. He didn't want to use the leader. I don't know. I'm not sure. But that pad he's using, yeah, that's made of newspaper. That's Heather Spiewak. She's blowing in the end of the iron, inflating as Ernesto holds that bottom end. And then eventually there's going to be a reheat. They got to go back to the furnace. It's the heat that makes the glass soft and malleable. So the gaffer at the bench again, Ernesto Echeverria, working for Nisha Bansil. He's using some calipers to get the right measurement. This has to be just the right size because again, the piece of glass origami that Nisha's made it's fused onto a plate of glass in an oven. So Ernesto is going to be picking that up and fusing his bubble to that one out of an oven. Should be pretty exciting. It's one of those moment of truth moments, and that's coming up here pretty soon because the origami piece that Nisha has in the oven's taken her several days to create. It started out as paper, and then she used a mold process that she developed to actually encapsulate that in a mold and then cast glass with it. So should be interesting. I'm not really exactly sure how your process works. Nisha, would you like to explain it a little bit?
Okay. So what happens when I make the molds is that I cast the paper like we folded, and I shellac the paper so it becomes a little more rigid. And then because of that, I'm able to make a plaster silica mold that can withstand the heat of the kiln. So I am then packing those molds with like loose glass frit and taking them up to about 1380 degrees. But this was particularly challenging for me because I had to fuse a ring onto the pieces as well, and I was trying to do it in one firing. So what I ended up doing was filling the cavities of the molds with talc so that the talc would hold the glass in place, but still give me enough of a cushion to rest my plate on so that it didn't slump down into the mold and not stay a plate anymore. So that's how they happen. And it was really, really hard for me to make these molds because I had to switch powders. So I had probably about 4 failures for every success. And that's kind of a sad track record.
I know, it's pretty good if you're a parent.
Well, what you're trying is very experimental, and I think that's pretty typical for new technology.
Yeah.
So let's see how this works
especially where
out.
you're dealing with glasses that you haven't necessarily worked with before, types of glass that have their own behaviors, temperature, powder size, all those things are important. Yeah, it's the glass doesn't always want to stay glass. If you hold it at the wrong temperature, it actually will crystallize and behave completely differently. And some of Nisha's work, because of what we talked about earlier, she's really asking glass to do things that no one has really asked to do before, and it doesn't always cooperate.
All right, so it looks like they're moving on to the Punty. So Ernesto has the bubble for the dome blown out as wide as he's going to blow that, as big as he's going to blow it. Chris has a solid steel rod here, just like the last piece. This is going to be transferred from one iron to the other. And then Ernesto, similar to the way Chris did, will open the lip, but he's going to open this a little more straight-walled. It's not going to be quite as low of a bowl. This is more of a display dome for the origami piece. Okay, so they've fused the punny onto the bottom of the bubble. Ernesto made a neckline in that, so it comes off of that iron too. It's important to create a little constriction anytime you attach the glass to an iron. That becomes the spot where it breaks free. You have to control how it breaks. So there we have the Punty transfer. Excellent, excellent. Now the glass that's left on the blowpipe, that's called the moil, and that will just break off as the glass cools down. It'll contract against the steel. It will pop off of there, and all of our scrap glass can be remelted. So. Oh yeah, smoke show. So that's the Rubens Tube. Simon Bjarning on the keyboards there. Let's hear it for Simon. He's done a great job this evening. Adding an extra auditory and visual stimulus.
Percussionist and musician with the Orchestra of the Southern Finger Lakes.
That's right. That's right.
This isn't, for this Rubens tube, we're not turning the gas on and off. It's actually a single amount of gas that's flowing through, It's actually the pressure of the sound waves from the speaker mounted at one end of this aluminum tube with lots of holes drilled in the top that makes the pulses. The shaping fire with sound. Even as we shape the glass with fire. I'd actually buy an MP3 of this song. I like this. It's very festive. Especially if it comes with a Rubens Tube for my house.
Okay, so it looks like the origami piece that Nisha made is in this oven, and is this where it is? It's in this oven? Pretty close. They're looking for this to be 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It has to be that hot because if it's much lower than that, the glass that Ernesto has on the end of his iron won't stick to that glass, or it might only partially stick, and then it could fall on the floor on the way back over to the furnace. So he's actually going to open that into a full dome shape, like a big bowl, and then that's going to be pressed down in here over the plate that the origami is on. This is all going to make a lot more sense when you see it happening. And that's going to be happening in just a few minutes here, probably under 5 minutes or so. So Ernesto's using centrifugal force to shape the glass. He's got a pad of newspaper that's been soaking in water for a couple hours, and he's shaping the glass, holding that edge in, similar to how Chris finished the bowl earlier on. And you can see Chris Rochelle there. He's holding a board in front of Ernesto's arm because as he opens that radiant heat builds up. And you can get a radiant heat burn on your arm, so that just protects his arm a little bit.
Chris is turning up that oven, getting it hot and ready to receive Ernesto's bell jar shape, getting it in position so he will flip the top of that open and then go straight in with the iron. Box to stand on so you can get a good view. This technique of making pieces in advance and then assembling them hot glass to hot glass is common for certain types of glass making, different types of forms. Say making complicated goblet work, for example, or sculptural work. In this case, it's sculptural. Chris is checking out the dynamics of it. Ernesto checking with the calipers. It doesn't have to be absolutely precise, but it needs to be good within about 1/8 of an inch or so. Otherwise, if it's too big, it won't find the edges. If it's too small, it'll get too close to the delicate pâte à verre form on the inside. So Heather is putting on the silver suit this time. She'll be taking the piece as soon as they touch it down, get it stuck together. There's not going to be very much time that they'll have, because they can't do a lot of reheats on this, because they'll end up melting the very delicate pâte à verre paper-like forms, the hexagonal forms that Nisha's made. So trying to get the choreography set here, even as they're also getting the shape, getting the temperature right. A piece like this is very complicated and really takes a team.
Okay, they're getting ready to fuse this dome onto the plate in the oven. So Chris is using a high-powered torch. It's oxygen propane propelled. So that gets up to about 3,000 degrees at the tip there. It's instantly liquefying that lip and making it really, really hot, really, really molten, and therefore really, really sticky. So when Ernesto takes this and presses it against the edge of the plate that's in the oven, the idea is that it will all fuse together. And then after that, just like the last piece, it has to go into an oven, the entire piece all together, so it can cool down. And I would imagine this piece will have to cool for at least 24 hours because of the complexity. So after they pick this plate up, you won't be able to see it very much because he's going to be moving quickly. He's going to take it over to that furnace and he's going to flash it. A flash heat is where you try and balance the temperature, get everything to around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. They may do that a couple times just to stabilize everything, make sure everything is homogeneous in temperature. And then it goes away. Then it's broken off and hopefully it all comes out in one piece. Again, this is very experimental, though, so you never know what's going to happen. This is really the first time that anything like this has been done here. Here, this is a price check here. He's just going to check the size. This is it? Okay, no, this is the fusion. Surprise, everybody.
One and go.
Here we go. Nope. That was the price check.
You get a quick glimpse there on the monitor, though, of that hexagonal paper pattern like Nisha was making and some of you were able to get to. False start.
All right.
Psych.
You can see the furnace is getting duller too because they turn the furnace off because they don't want to thermally shock this piece. If it gets too hot too quick, it's going to pop apart. It's going to break because of that stress from the rapid heating. So they're going to pick this up and they turn that furnace off so it kind of eases back up to 1,000 degrees. By the time he gets it from here to there, it'll have lost 300 degrees or so. Fingers crossed, everybody. One quick measurement. So he's making some fine adjustments on the scale here, on the size. So everything matches up just right when he fuses it together. This is Ernesto Echeverria at the bench. Let's give him a round of applause. He's been doing a great job tonight. He's been helping Nisha for quite a while on projects in the hot shop.
How long have you two been working together?
He manages a production studio, or an art studio, actually, a glass blowing studio in Woodstock, Vermont, called Pablo Glass.
Yeah, they've been working closely together for about 3 years.
3 years they've
Ernesto
been working
and
together.
Nisha,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so the big moment's coming up, the big pickup. They're getting the heat just right. Ernesto's using the what we call the mid-range torch there, or the 8x8. That's like a laser beam for us. If we want to instantly heat something to manipulate it, that's what we use. And Chris has a different torch there. That's what we call the fluffy torch. And that's for gently heating the back end of something that's not getting enough heat from the furnace. So here we go. Let's everybody watch real close here. It's about to get real. All right, so he's pushing it one lip to the other. Here we go. Let's see if it's stuck. Yes, it did. There we go. And right back into the furnace to get that heat back up where it needs to be. That piece is so delicate right now. It is so precarious, and he has to be very, very precise with his movements. He doesn't want to slam that down on the bench. Everything's very delicate, and the piece just got twice as heavy. All right, so Chris is just gonna push on that just a little bit to make sure they have complete fusion. And Ernesto is just taking some gentle flashes in the furnace before they break this free. That's Heather Spiewak in the silver coat. She's ready to load this piece into the oven. And again, everything we make here has to be cooled very slowly in a process called annealing. So he said he's going to give it one more flash. So one more heat in the furnace. They're going to come out. Heather's ready. She's got some Kevlar gloves on because she doesn't want to burn her hands.
But you can see even with all this heating, that form is not sagging. The powder, the delicate powder pattern that Nisha made is holding its shape.
Yep.
It's like a specimen in a bell jar now, like a 19th century science cupboard.
All right, a couple of drops of water at the neckline here, and a sharp tap to the iron, and away it goes into the oven. Let's
Still
hear
together.
it for Nisha Bansil and Ernesto Echeverria. Excellent job.
Amazing, delicate work.
Congratulations, Nisha and the team. Again, that's Nisha Bansil, our visiting artist. Ernesto Echeverria. We've got our team of gaffers, Chris Rochelle, Aaron Jack, Heather Spiewak, and then we have our visiting musician, Simon Bjarning. Let's hear it for everybody. Congratulations.
And we've got on narration, Jeff Mack.
Jane Cook. Thanks everybody for stopping by. You let us know if you have any questions, okay?